Welcome back, and thank you for joining us, Shark's Perspective, the podcast with subject matter experts in marketing. One of the most important products or services that you'll ever market is you, but a lot of marketers don't know well how to market their own most important brand. Is your online content telling a good story? Are your resume and LinkedIn profile optimized with the right keywords? Is the hot market we're in the right time for you to look for another position? Jerry Bernhart is the founder of Bernhart Associates Executive Search, and he's a highly experienced recruiter with 3 decades of experience and subject matter expertise focused solely on helping marketers get hired. And on this episode, we'll discuss brand positioning, when to look, the importance of networking, and other things you need to do to get hired. So let's tune in to a headhunter with Candidate Shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Jerry, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective today. Tell us a little bit, if you will, about your background in recruiting and your career thus far.
Well, I've been at it for, let me think, just going on almost 30 years now. And started with a recruiting chain that some people may be familiar with called Management Recruiters. And I believe they still exist, although I think they've been acquired along the way. But they had a couple of offices here in Minneapolis, and walked in there one day, actually interested in talking to them about seeing if they might have some job opportunities for me. And by the time the interview was over with, they looked at me and they said, "Have you ever thought about being a recruiter?" I said, "Absolutely not." Would have no interest whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left, and they asked me to come back, and they were really good at what they did, because they said, "We're not going to let you slip away this fast. You seem to really check a lot of the check boxes that our successful headhunters have here,
Mm-hmm.
and why don't you talk to some of them for a while and see if this is something you might have some interest in." So I did, and so they offered me a position. Really, I was starting from scratch pretty much. I'd actually been in prior to that, I'd worked with a payroll service and with an HR company, so I had some experience with that, but not in this regard.
Sure.
As it relates to actual recruiting. So long story short, I decided to give it a shot. Really poured myself into it, and I first started off placing call center managers and directors and whatnot. And this was back in late 80s, early 90s, when call centers were really starting to pop up all over the place.
Right.
And being in Minnesota, a lot of these were in the Midwest, in particular, Omaha. And throughout Iowa. So I ended up working with a lot of the major call center providers that were building call centers, many of them in small towns, around the Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed people to run those. So I found a really good niche. And then the other thing I recall is MCI, remember the old long distance company?
Absolutely.
Well, they were on a hiring spree, and they needed a lot of sales leaders and sales, regional sales managers and things of that nature. And so somehow I got hooked up with them, and I ended up recruiting and placing just a ton of salespeople with that organization. And after a couple of years, I kind of realized I was getting pretty good at this. And I thought, you know what? I think I can pretty much kind of do this on my own. But I really wanted to make a switch. And instead of sticking with call center operations and sales, I kind of wanted to get more into marketing, which is really what I was doing and what I really enjoy the most. And so that's kind of how it all began. And so, for the last, 20, 29 years, I've been working strictly as a solo operator. And, I've never been part of another chain, never really hired any staff to speak of. I mean, I've had a few helpers along the way. But
Sure.
This has been my baby.
And
This has been my baby.
your focus 100% of the time's on digital marketing, right?
No, I'm a marketing guy,
Gotcha.
but it's not just digital, right? I place VPs of
Sure.
marketing, I place
Right.
CMOs, but marketing is the name of the game for me. Back in the 90s, before there was digital and e-commerce, I was working with catalog companies, direct
Sure.
mailers, companies that were involved in direct response. I did a lot of the DRTV space for a while as well. So I'd say direct response is probably the best way to describe what I did during much of the 90s until toward the end of the decade. At that point, and I was also writing the database marketing wave, hooked up with Arthur Hughes, who was one of the kind of the, you may or may not recognize that name.
No, I do.
Yeah, he wrote a book, several of them, on database marketing that became bestsellers, and he traveled the world talking about data-driven marketing. And I linked up with him because he had a lot of clients looking for database marketers. Back in those days, we were placing directors of database marketing, VPs of database marketing, analysts. I placed tons of analysts, statisticians for credit card companies and, insurance companies and catalog companies, and essentially anybody who is engaged in sending out large amounts of direct mail, and the vendors that supported them. So the Axions of the world, the Merkles of the world, the Epsilons of the world, and then when the advent of the internet kind of changed things a bit, because I really saw the future, really moving more toward the online piece. I think, I'm proud to say to some extent I was a little ahead of myself. I actually launched a website, a business called directmarketingcareers.com, which not too many people remember because it was direct marketing. There was no really any e-commerce or digital marketing, except that it was a online job site.
Sure.
One of the first in the marketing field. It was even ranked by Weddell's among the top. And I ran that for, I guess, about 6-7 years, and then found out that I was turning down a lot of searches to run that, and I thought, I really want to get more into the e-commerce space because I really saw that beginning to pick up pace. So I decided to kind of set that aside and just dive back into my executive recruiting business. Since then, the early 2000s, clearly the emphasis has been on digital marketing for sure.
Well, since we've been connected on LinkedIn, I've seen 1,000 posts from you in our LinkedIn history. I mean, everything from loyalty manager at the Pittsburgh Steelers to an email marketing killer in New York to an e-commerce director in Dallas. So I know that you're constantly out there a lot. So where are we in the market today? And I think most people know at this point that it's a buyer's market. But have there been any other, large shifts that you've seen emerging? Are we still in that period, and are you seeing any kind of changes whatsoever?
Well, again, I look at it from a pretty narrow perspective because, again, my focus is marketing, right? So I can tell you that, over the last, 15 years, the big shift in marketing clearly has been towards the data and technology side.
Sure.
And, those are, obviously must-have skills as a marketer, or you don't have a future.
Exactly.
And even in the old days, there was a certain amount of that. But obviously the technology has changed, dramatically. And, of course, now, you're dealing with, I don't know how many, just jillions of different platforms and devices, and it's just a lot more complicated these days.
Sure.
To be a marketer. It's a great time to be a marketer. It's probably the best time to be a marketer. But you got a lot of balls in the air now, right? That you didn't have maybe 10, 15 years ago, which obviously makes their job more challenging, but also a great deal more rewarding.
Absolutely. So as we've discussed before, I've got many moons of experience in recruiting and hiring, and I'm fascinated still by the personal branding that makes up a candidate. And it's the only product that can change its mind after all. Though, in your mind, what's the difference in today's hiring process, say, versus say 5 or 10 years ago? I mean, you can still be the right candidate, have all the right experience needed with a properly written resume, with all the PPC this and the SEO that, and still never get considered, even when you could read somewhere that company was like a lot of others, desperately looking for qualified candidates. I ran into a friend of mine just recently from Brazil. Como vai todo mundo do Brasil? Espero que você está bem. But my friend said that they were having a ridiculously tough time trying to find MarTech talent, and who knows if they've got just stacks of resume submissions sitting in their inbox. But when you look at just the past over the last 5 or 10 years, how have you seen the hiring process evolve?
Well, the one thing I can tell you for sure is that the whole hiring process has been stretched. I remember maybe, I don't know about 5 years ago, but, maybe 10 years or before that, employers, would make decisions, on a shorter time frame. I mean, there were many situations where I, present a candidate, and within 2 weeks we had an offer, and they had a start date set, and they were good to go.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's rare. And I would say, everything takes at least a month, sometimes a lot longer than that. I've got one search going on right now that's going into its 5th month.
Oh, goodness.
I've had some that have gone 7, 8 months. Now,
Mm-hmm.
those are kind of, the exception, not the rule, but those were really rare. I don't remember having anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
15, 20 years ago. So number one, they're just stretching out the process. Part of that is because there's more stakeholders involved in the decision making than there might have used to been. And some of that might be, because of compliance and other things that, have changed over the years. But the other thing is that, back in I'm trying to think when this might have been the case, back in the late 90s when things were really growing, and we were really experiencing a period of fast expansion. It was like everybody just needed butts and seats. It was just get us butts and seats, right? Now, those butts truly have to fit that seat. And job descriptions have become a lot longer.
Oh, Lord.
The wish lists have become a lot longer. And if they can't find the exact person they want to hire, they're not going to hire them. Now, we hear about all these statistics about 5 million jobs open, 6 million, 7 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are open, and employers, quote unquote, can't fill. Well, I think you and I both know, we all know they could fill them if they wanted to.
Exactly.
They just don't elect to fill them until they find someone who checks, if not all, most of the check boxes. And I get it. I mean, hiring the wrong person can be very costly to a business, maybe even more so, than it was many years ago. But that's just one of those things that that as someone who's been in this business for as long as I have, I will tell you that's a lot different, than what it used to be. Is that the mass hiring that we used to experience back in the late 90s, maybe even the early 2000s, just doesn't exist now. And maybe that's just because, business has changed. I'm not, in my industry, again, my focus being marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of companies back in those days that were growing very rapidly, becoming very dominant. They needed a lot of people, and they were, to some extent, kind of pioneers, in what they were doing. A lot, and there's still some of that now, but not nearly to the extent that it existed back then.
Mm-hmm. So, there are a lot of differences in your roles, I think for people to understand, but discuss, if you will, what the difference is in using a recruiter like you versus a career coach versus a headhunter versus a corporate recruiter versus a typical agency relationship and so on. I guess, if you're somebody who's looking for a job, what's your advice on where they go to get an ally in recruiting to help them find a position, because I know there are still people that overgeneralize it and think that everybody's in that role, and you've got a lot of career coaches that are out there now who are offering a lot of fluffy advice, but good luck putting your resume in front of a hiring manager at that point. So talk, if you will, a little bit about what are some of the options that people are using to succeed in finding jobs using a recruiter.
Well, I tell everybody, don't depend on us. I give sessions on Clarity FM. I'm a member of the faculty of Clarity.fm, which consists of a global sort of a faculty of experts that they have selected to join their organization to give people paid advice. I've been doing this for like 5 years. And I do these sessions on Saturday mornings. I've been doing this, like I said, for a long, long time. And this is to help people who have these very questions. Resumes, LinkedIn, how can I, get the right job? So I live this. And I tell everybody the fact of the matter is, the odds of me placing you are pretty slim. And it's just because we are, we're that slice of whatever it is, 2, 3, 4% of the market, right, that employers go to fill open racks. The vast majority of it is done through postings, through people they know, social media. So if anything, our participation rate has probably fallen, with the advent of all these other channels. So, and I think a lot of candidates do put maybe a little bit, depend a little bit much on, hoping their phone's going to ring from some headhunter who's got the perfect job. So the next option, of course, well, you respond to postings, whether it's LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever. I know that response rates through those channels are also pretty bad. I've seen percentages as low as 3, 4, 5%. The odds of getting a call back for an interview can be very low, and part of that's because these postings often start with applicant tracking systems that use technology to screen your resume.
Exactly.
And if you don't have the right keywords, or in some cases even the right education, you don't even, no pair of human eyes is even going to see your resume. So that's one option, but it's based on what I hear from the candidates that I speak to. Gee, I've sent out 100 resumes and I think I got 2 responses. I hear that a lot. The channel that works the best, obviously, is through the people you know. It's through networking, and this is how when companies call me and they're out there, they're interested in talking to recruiters about possibly helping them with a search. So they'll talk to a few of us, right? And so I'll follow up with them. And in many cases, people go, "Oh, listen, we found someone on our own. Thanks for talking to us, but we took care of it." And that's typically the response I get when a company decides, well, after all, we don't really need to use a recruiter. It wasn't because of the posting; it's because it was someone who came through their network. And then finally, the other thing I tell everybody is, be proactive. LinkedIn, for example, was an amazing tool. Got everybody's name and title and company right up there in front of you. So figure out a way through your network to get introduced to people who, in turn, can introduce you to people who may be hiring.
Sure.
Or, the other thing you can do is you can flat out respond to people who are doing the hiring. You may not know them. You may not have had a relationship with them. But you've got their information, and you can, I encourage people to do that. Send them a note. It's got to be done well. It's got to be written well. It's got to be professional. But it's kind of like selling yourself. It's what salespeople do.
Absolutely.
So, but a lot of folks aren't comfortable with that, right? Because they're not used to selling themselves. They're marketers. They're used to selling whatever it is their service or product is. But when it comes to selling themselves, I've had senior executives, people who you would think after 30 years sort of, understand that concept, and they would go, I've never done that. And I'd try it. You might be amazed, And so that's something I'm encouraging people to do more and more, actually. And, I'm not saying that you're going to get, your response rates are going to be through the roof. But I'll tell you this, they're probably going to be no worse than
Absolutely.
any other channel. Yeah, and in fact, in some cases, people that I have helped in that regard have come back to report to me that, my goodness, I got more people responding to that than anything else I did. And they may not have had an immediate opening at the moment, but now they know about me. I'm in their pocket in case something does arise. And not only that, they've gone to my profile, and maybe they've looked at some of and maybe somebody else will call them someday and go, hey, who do you know? So it's all networking, and that's really, I think, these days, that's how most people I know are landing their jobs.
So, as in regards to LinkedIn, what are some of the best ways you see that people should optimize their profiles?
Well, it's funny. A lot of people need help with that.
Absolutely.
First of all, LinkedIn is constantly changing things, and you got to keep up with it. As I think about this, the people that I work with, because that's part of what I do, is I help people with their profile. I don't write their profile, but I can look at one and right off the bat give them a lot of tactical advice. But strategically, your profile, people take their resume and just plaster it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that's what I see quite often. Now, some of that's okay. I mean, as far as your accomplishments, some of the specific things that you've done, to lift the business and improve efficiencies or penetrate new markets, all that's great. And those are things that also appear in your resume. But let me tell you, the best profiles that I've seen, and I've seen some killer profiles, they tell a story. They tell me who is this? What are his superpowers? What makes him who he or her? What makes him or her who they are? And why should I have some interest in them? And that doesn't just stop with your professional history, but in some sections it's appropriate to talk about maybe some things you've accomplished in your personal life. You've run marathons. I've had a guy that ran 10 marathons. No indication anywhere on his LinkedIn profile that he did that. And he said, "Are you kidding me? What do you think that communicates to an employer looking at your profile?"
Absolutely.
So things like that, and I could
Charity
name off.
work.
Yeah, charity work. I mean, the list is endless. People don't think about it. If they sit down and think about it, or they have someone like me or a friend, it's almost like a deposition. You really got to
Right.
dig deep.
Yeah.
Well, people aren't used to thinking about themselves. Gee, what did I do? What can I brag about? People don't naturally like to brag about themselves. So it's like, well, I go through this whole line of questioning. So, have you been involved in athletics? What do you do? Blah blah blah. And I tell you, every time something comes out, and it's all part of this idea of telling me who you are. Tell your story. That's kind of what that whole summary section is.
Yeah.
At the top, which is really important. And then tactically, there's a bunch of stuff people can do, which we won't go into detail here, but there's a lot of things people overlook or they just don't know about. If they're not using this tool every day like I am, there's a lot of things they just don't know. And the reason I know is because I'm searching on LinkedIn with the top product they offer corporations and headhunters when it comes to recruiting. So I know, what they're looking for and what's important. So having that information to share with them, there's some really eye-opening moments. They go, wow, I didn't realize. The other thing about LinkedIn is that it's not, there's really no contextual search going on. It's pretty much all keywords.
Yeah.
So you really have to make sure you're covered with whatever keywords you're going to use, that people are going to use, I should say, that will help them get to your profile. And making sure your photograph is really well done. That's really important. And there's a bunch of other stuff. But the good news here, the good news is regardless of your background or what you've done, you can really make that thing sing if you do it well.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're thinking about brushing off the old Word doc, what are some of the things, best practices and ways that people need to optimize their resume?
Boy, I could talk about that all day. These days, common practice is, resume formats have changed a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, they used to be very formulaic and kind of stuffed. These days, what I see mostly are headlines at the top. Something that tells me about the role that you're looking to pursue. Whether that's a senior marketing leader, digital commerce, e-com, whatever. Uh, and then kind of a professional summary usually is what follows next. Your elevator pitch, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, why you're qualified to pursue the type of role that you've indicated in your headline. And then there's an expertise section, the core competencies, which I think is good. It's kind of a quick hit list of your knowledge, so the reader understands exactly who they're dealing with. Kind of what's the realm of your knowledge to figure out whether you're a good fit. And this is where you can stick in a lot of your keywords. So essentially, the top third of the front page needs to be a snapshot of who you are. This has to really contain everything I need to know about you in terms of the type of job you're targeting, why you're qualified for that type of job, okay, and what does a reader really need to know about me, and give them some teasers for the rest of the resume so they'll actually read it. Most resumes, I've seen some statistics that I think employers, hiring managers spend, 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds at the most, probably more like 20 seconds reading a resume. So that top third's that's really got to stand out. And I think a lot of people spend more time on the bottom two-thirds filling it with stuff when that top third has to be really, really powerful. In fact, I think for many people, I won't say most, but for many people, it almost pays to have a resume writer write that for you, because that's critical. I mean, that's the difference between the A and the B pile. It really is.
I tell you, if I see one more resume, though, that comes in that says passionate.
Yeah, and then there are a lot of worn out words. People still using the same,
seasoned.
Responsible for. Yeah.
Responsible for.
Yeah. There's like 50 words that I say, don't even think about using them. And of course, you still see them a lot on resumes. People don't, again, they're not, you don't need to be a professional writer, but you really need to think, this is not, you're not, this kind of writing is a little bit different than what you're accustomed to, And again, the good news is, with a little bit of guidance and maybe even someone to help you write it, you can make a resume, really stand out. And then, of course, there's other formats these days where you've got left rail information. I like some of those too. Just, without images. You don't need pictures and images and stuff like that. But there are some ways to reformat resumes, kind of make them a little more contemporary, that I think are very effective. And I see a bunch of those. And so what I do is I just give them a sample of, 5, 6 different kind of resumes. Let them choose, right? But if they really struggle, then my advice is go find a resume writer.
Absolutely.
Few $100, it's probably one of the best investments you will ever make in your career. I know it's kind of hard to convince people of that, because that's still kind of a sizable investment for a lot of people. But you know what? What's more important than you? What's more important? Other than your family, and it's your livelihood. And so you can't cut corners with this. You can't.
Agreed.
And that's what I try to convince people when I speak with them. If I see something that definitely needs help, I'm going to be very blunt with them about it, because I know that if they send it out, I see some of these resumes and they complain they're not getting any response. Well, there's a reason for that.
Agreed. Jerry, there's an age-old adage that you've probably never heard of before, and I'm going to be likely the first person to ever share this with you, but it's that you look for a job when you've already got a job. And seriously, though, to you, when is the right time to look for a job, and what are you seeing from candidates today who are sort of in the process and trying to decide whether or not they look, and you're having to convince them that this is the perfect time?
Best time to look for a job is when you kind of least expect it.
Yeah.
Most of the people that I place, they weren't looking. They're heads down, doing their job, doing a great job. And I come along, and we start talking about their career. We talk about, so where do you want to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now? How is this job helping you get there? If I hear some pain points, we have a follow-up discussion. We talk about, I have one question that I've been using for 30 years. It's a great question, and I'll share it. I mean, this is something that kind of gets people thinking. And I say to them, so I don't call someone and say, hey, do I have a great job for you? That's not the way I approach this at all. And if a recruiter ever calls you and says that, very politely hang up the phone.
Right.
First of all, I talk to I speak to their agenda. I mean, that obviously is at least for me, that's what drives the conversation. But I have a question that really gets people thinking. I say, if you could change anything about your job right now, if you could wave a magic wand, Shark, if you could wave a magic wand and change anything about your current role as it relates to the person you're reporting to, the financial stability of your employer, the people you work with, your commute, money, the impact it's having on your family, or I mean, there's a lot of different things. What would you change? And so I listened very carefully to that response, because there are some things you can change, and there are some things you can't. And I listened very intently to how they respond, and then based on how that dialogue goes, I make the determination that I think I have something that would allow the changes they need to be happier in their role and to advance their career. That's not always the case. Sometimes people might say, I gotta come in at 6 in the morning, and I have to leave or whatever. Maybe their hours aren't so great. I'm having trouble picking up my kids, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, just stuff, just kind of as an example. And then I might say to them, well, have you ever talked to your boss about, possibly tweaking your hours? And they go, yeah, well, it's been a while.
Sure.
I'll try it again. I mean, there are certain things that they might have control over. That's not, a great example, but it's an example, of something that, they might have some control over. Other things, let me tell you what they may not have control over. If they say to me, you know what, my boss is a jerk, that's a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
It's the main reason. It's the main reason people leave their jobs. All right. And so I listen very carefully. What do you mean he's a jerk? Why? What's he do? So we get into that discussion, try to find out a little bit more about. All right, is this something that you think will ever change? Oh no, he is what he is. Oh, okay. Got to understand that. Or you may say, they're coming down hard on him, and he may not even be around much longer. Well, maybe they'll bring in someone else that you can get along with.
Right.
Yeah. So really getting into what I call them fierce conversations. If you're going to talk with me, you're going to have a fierce conversation. Okay. This isn't going to be about, this is not going to be a puff discussion. And people know that. Those who work with me understand that. And out of those fierce conversations, I make the initial determination, is this something that I think will advance their career and their life and help their family? And if it doesn't, then you know what? We're going to wait for the next one.
Mm-hmm.
Because the last thing you want to do is put a square peg in a round hole.
Exactly.
Right. And there are a lot of recruiters out there who kind of work in that regard because they think mostly about themselves. And that's when you really get into trouble.
Agreed. Jerry,
Yeah.
Based on your last question, based on your most important question, I think it's time. Are you ready for the 5 most important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Word doc or PDF?
Well, you mean as far as a resume goes?
Yes. In general.
In general? Probably a Word doc because I'd want to make changes.
So asking a man in Minnesota, Land of the Lost with America's favorite funny man, Will Ferrell, or Land of 10,000 Lakes, where it's minus 200 degrees in January?
Land of 10,000 Lakes all the way.
All right. Minnesota Vikings or Minnesota Twins?
Bikes.
Purple Rain or 1999?
1999.
And the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread?
Oh, my goodness. That's a tough one. I'd say cornbread.
That may be one you have to move into your interview process. So, Jerry, then where do people find out more about you, follow you, connect, get the newsletter, etc.?
All over the place. LinkedIn, you can find my profile, my website, bernhart.com. You can Google my name, Jerry Bernhart. You're going to see a million interviews and presentations and all kinds of stuff out there. You'll find me on a bunch of lists, too. I'm on, the Ad Age list of headhunters, Marketing Sherpa, Marketing Hire. I'm listed in other places that I can't recall. And I've got 30,000 connections on LinkedIn, which is the maximum, by the way.
Nice.
So if you're in this space, if you're in online marketing, or even, marketing's pretty big, but I'd say if you're in any way connected with the world of digital commerce, and if we're not connected already, you're going to probably know someone who either is or is going to know someone. Yeah.
They're 1 degree from Jerry Bernhart. So maybe
2 degrees.
Maybe 6 from Kevin Bacon. But
I'm going to tell you, nobody's more than 3 degrees away from me, and millions are probably 2 degrees. Yeah. So I mean, there's a damn good chance they're going to know somebody who knows of me. All right.
So, Jerry, thank you so much for joining us on A Shark's Perspective.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on your program.
So there was my conversation with Jerry Bernhart, the founder of Bernhart Associates Executive Search and a highly experienced recruiter with 3 decades of experience and subject matter expertise focused solely on helping marketers get hired. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, like most professions, data and technology are just must-haves for marketers, or your future will be limited. You don't necessarily have to be a techie, but you do need to understand your surrounding technical landscape. And by the way, remember that it's a great time to be a marketer, and when you consider the amount of new technology that's out there, you can become a respected expert quickly just by knowing well the platforms used by your brand. Second, getting a job is just different than it was not that long ago. Generally, the whole hiring process has been stretched out because there are a lot more decisions that are made more slowly and often by a bigger committee of stakeholders within a company. Job descriptions are ridiculously longer, and employers won't look at your potential unless often you first check off every box or nearly all of them. But it's also true to remember that hiring the wrong person can be even more costly for a business. A lot of companies often look too much about how a prospective candidate clicks with a team. But what about hiring someone who doesn't know what they're doing well, and let's say, for example, they're in charge of building out your tech stack? Third, I couldn't agree more with Jerry when he says, don't rely on a headhunter solely to get you a job. You've got to use all of your tools. For me, I always encourage people to build out their profiles first. Focus on building your brand. Spend time on LinkedIn with posts and likes and shares, and engage with others in your field. Show us your superpower, your subject matter expertise, and network. Be proactive. Market yourself. Think about this. Think of how marketing has evolved. No one wants to hear brand messaging, even yours. An employer needs to connect with your story. Make sure you demonstrate your skills and also show some personality. Thank you so much for spending this time with me in order to discuss one of the many components that makes up marketing today. A good friend gave me a thought that I'll leave with you. Companies should stop hiring great employees and instead just hire great people. Good point. Just remember to never give up. A job that you will love is out there waiting for you. So join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.